Welcome to your next art project called Forgotten Creature. This project is inspired by an artist named Curiot. He is a Mexican artist, and he creates these amazing, fantastical creatures as murals, as paintings, digital art, all kinds of art, and he's really inspiring. He describes his style as having a mystical essence, depicting that which cannot be seen, offering a further glimpse into the subtle realms. So pause this video and go back to Google Classroom and watch the YouTube video that I have included there called Shunya, and then come back here and I'll explain the assignment. So here's some other examples of Curiot's work. On the left, you see the full painting, and on the right, you see a detail because it's filled with textures and lines and patterns. One thing I love about Curiot's work is he includes inspiration from his culture, from like pre-Columbian types of artistic references, pattern references from Mayan cultures, from Aztec cultures, from his personal Mexican culture. And so when you look at his work, look carefully and see if you can spot some of that. Here's another example of a creature. And I love how they look sometimes futuristic for some reason with this sort of glass see-through body, but also somehow ancient as well. And notice on the right-hand side, again, you can see those patterns of the amazing textures. His work is also incredibly colorful. And so that really lends a sense of wonder and interest. But his backgrounds tend to be fairly simple, if you'll notice sort of the gradients that he uses. But sometimes he puts his creatures into environments, and that's something that you might want to think about. Here's another mural. He will oftentimes use a lot of references from nature. So you might see a lot of branches, leaves, flowers, and roots. They are oftentimes very mystical. This one on the left-hand side there of this sort of human figure being lifted up into space. Again, sort of futuristic, but also feels very ancient at the same time. Here's another one of his murals. Here's Caitlin Hackett, another artist that does some really interesting creatures. And she's actually a student, used to be a student of mine. She graduated from Arcata High quite a number of years ago, and she's a working artist today. Notice she has a really amazing website that is linked here in this presentation. I encourage you to check it out, but here are some of her works from her website. Notice again, lots of texture being used, lots of pattern being used. Her creatures are also very mystical. She calls her work contemporary mythology. And so sometimes you'll see references of actual myths. I think this seven-tailed fox is from a myth. And you'll see all kinds of references. You might recognize some of them. After she graduated from Arcata High, she went to a pretty famous art school called RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design. She's had jobs as toy designer, website designer, and now she tends to just sell her work online and in galleries. Here's some more of her work. You'll see multiple eyes appear a lot of times, a lot of botanical illustrations, a lot of combining animals. You know, we have the sort of jackalope here, and a lot of anatomical things too. Some of her work is a little bit creepy. If you go to her website, you'll see some are a little bit gruesome, but very, very interesting and thought-provoking. Here are a couple more. She oftentimes puts them into circles or rectangles or frames on their work. That's something that you could think about doing if you like that look. And then here's another artist. His name is James Dean. He is a Taiwanese-American artist, and he got his fame from being a Marvel and DC comic cover artist. He now has sort of retired from the comics and is just doing his own personal paintings. But again, incredible creatures. And very, very detailed patterns and colors and textures. So you're seeing kind of a theme developing here, right? These are what would we call monochromatic. Monochromatic is when it's one color but various shades of that color. So for example, at least the left and the right hand one, it's all blues and whites, but all shades of blue, from the very, very lightest blue to very, very darkest blue. Here are a couple other James Dean. I love how he has turned the water into a beautiful pattern, beautiful shapes, very graceful. Notice she's also somewhat of a tortoise, right? And I believe I see something that looks very squid-like. So James also takes multiple types of creatures and human elements and puts them together. And then Hieronymus Bosch is the last artist that I'm highlighting. This video here is linked in Google Classroom, so you can go back and watch it. He was from the Netherlands and worked in the late 1400s, so hundreds of years ago. But he created some very surreal and strange and sometimes frightening creatures way ahead of his time. The last three artists that I just show you are all contemporary. They're working today. But Hieronymus Bosch was working way before artists were doing this type of surreal and strange artwork. So he gets a lot of credit for being the first in that regard. His work has a lot of biblical references. This video is about his most famous work called The Garden of Earthly Delights, that has some references to the Garden of Eden. But here are a couple of his close-ups from that painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights. And again, you'll see all kinds of creatures that are sort of combined. You have a bird slash lizard slash seal, all these different kinds of things. So he's a really good example if you're interested in sort of combining different types of creatures. And you'll notice they do look a little bit sinister, a little bit scary. There are parts of the Garden of Earthly Delights that are sort of represent something heavenly, where the creatures are very definitely surreal, but they look kind of friendly. And then there's depictions of hell, which the creatures look much more scary. So what is your assignment? You're going to create your own forgotten creature. If you'll recall from the video, Kiryat and his artist partner created a forgotten creature, sort of imagining a made-up mythology. They gave their creature a name and a story, where it came from. And so you get a chance to sort of make up any kind of creature you want, imagining that it was sort of lost in history or forgotten, but maybe existed a long time ago. So this is the workflow you're going to do. You're going to create an inspiration or reference page in Google Docs. I'll tell you about that in a second. You'll learn and practice some colored pencil techniques. You'll draw 3 thumbnail sketches to figure out composition, placement, and basic creature features. And then you'll create your final forgotten creature. So that first inspiration or reference page, you'll do this in Google Docs. We have laptops in the classroom where you could even do this on your phone. If you have Google Classroom in your phone or Google Drive, this will probably work, although I suggest maybe using a school laptop. Might be a little bit easier. But on this Google Doc, you're just going to create a new Google Doc and open it up, and then copy and paste at least 3 images of creature art examples you like. Spend some time on Kiryat's website, spend some time on Caitlin Hackett's website, maybe any of the artists that we've seen, or you can do some research of your own. And maybe you know an artist or somebody that you follow on Instagram that does some creature art. Feel free to include that in this Google Doc. And then include at least 3 photographs of animals you want to use as reference. So maybe you want to use some references of a duck bill or a duck foot like you see here. Find some visual references. Artists use photographs and visual references all the time. It's an incredibly useful tool, and it's something that almost all artists use from time to time. So if you want to use scales, find a photograph of fishy scales that you might want to use. In this case, we have some horns from a deer, maybe some spiky porcupine quills, a duck foot, and some scales, but anything that you want. So think about the kind of creature you want to create, think about the kinds of textures you want to create, and find references for that. And you'll turn that into Google Classroom. Then the next step is to watch the video or ask your teacher to show you some colored pencil techniques. We want you to make sure that you know how to use hatching and cross-hatching, how to do smooth shading, how to blend colors. You'll notice if you look at Kiryat's work, and actually all of the artists' work, they don't always work in colored pencils, but they oftentimes their work could definitely be created in colored pencils, a variety of different techniques. And so we want you to get comfortable with the colored pencils and learn those techniques, and that's part of the goal of this assignment. Then once you know kind of what your creature is going to be and you have your references, you're going to figure out what kind of composition you need. And that's done by doing some thumbnail sketches. In your sketchbook or on some scratch paper, draw 2 or 3 little sketches exploring especially composition, maybe color themes that you want, textures that you're going to use, backgrounds, where is your creature? Is it flying in the sky with fluffy clouds? Is it hidden underneath a mushroom? Is it in a cave? Think about those types of details. And just you don't have to spend a ton of time on these thumbnail sketches, but it's basically setting up a plan for your final drawing. So your final drawing will be either 9 by 12 or 11 by 17, depending on your choice, how detailed you want to get it, your style, and so on. You'll use colored pencils. The whole paper should have color, but it can have a simple background if you wish. So maybe a simple gradient, but you could also place it in an environment. And your creature should fill most of the page, so it's not just tiny in the center, but really filling the page. This example here actually goes off the edges of the page. You could do that or not, your choice. All right, if you have any questions, talk to your teacher and have fun.